Hello there, my name's Brian Clark, and this is a very, very brief overview of the session I did on AI, opportunities, ethics, and practical implementation in schools. First thing I'd like to kind of start with is this quote from a member of the Children's Parliament, age 9. It says, AI will be in all our lives, so we need to know what it means, how it works before we grow up. I would say that quote is not just true of this young person, age 9 from Shetland, but probably to a lot of people and the majority of people in the country just now. This presentation isn't going to be able to answer all those questions, but hopefully I'll give a little overview of where we are and some of the things we need to think about and some tips for where you can start to think about using AI in your setting. Firstly, I think it's always important to acknowledge that the AI isn't new. It has been around since about the 50s. Lots of things have happened over the years. You've got chess playing machines, you've got self-driving phones, you've had voice assistants. But it wasn't really until about the end of 2022 when ChatGPT was available to the general public through the internet that the interest and understanding and the real kind of sea change really happened around about AI. And the reason for that is because ChatGPT and similar models are what we call generative artificial intelligence. Generative artificial intelligence, or Gen AI, is a type of AI that incorporates lots of tools like machine learning and things, and it's able to create new content. And that new content can be text, pictures, music, videos, all sorts of things. And it learns how to do that through how it's been programmed, all the data it's been fed, and sometimes, the information that we provide those Gen AI systems, the data we provide it, the prompts we provide it, the feedback we give them, it can use that data as part of its knowledge, understanding, and training and use that to create new content. So again, to give an example, just in really kind of simple terms, non-generative AI, so AI that isn't generative, that's kind of following patterns and trying to make decisions on its own based on a data set, would be something like the Netflix recommendation systems. So in Netflix, it understands, what you've been watching, what you've liked, what other people that are like you have been watching and what they've liked, and based on all that data, it's able to make recommendations based on what you might want to watch next based on your previous watching habits and things you've liked. And again, people similar to you. That is AI, it's machine learning that's doing that, but it's not generative AI because it's not creating any new content. In simple terms, to kind of explain this, if you look at something like Amazon just now, if you look at a product review, if you go down towards the bottom to the reviews section, you'll see the first review that pops up is an AI generated review based on what other customers have said. So there's some text that's appearing that no one's written this text. The AI has read all the reviews of that product and has generated this piece of text to explain the value or the usefulness of said product. So that text you can see there, no one wrote that, it was generated by AI. So even if you're not going off to places like ChatGPT and engaging with large language models all the time, you're actually being influenced and presented with generated AI content through things like Amazon reviews, through things like Google searches. It will give you an AI response. Those things have been generated by AI. So when it comes to generative AI, we need to be very aware of some of the considerations and perhaps challenges that we might have with that. So by generative AI, I'm talking about your Chat GPTs, your Google Geminis, those kind of text-based large language models. We have to really understand how it manages to generate the data that it does and the answers that it does and the implications of those things. So there's three things I want to talk about here around about how generative AI works. The first one being bias in AI models. So every AI model has a set of training data. So let's just take ChatGPT. The web, all the information on the web is its training data. it's been programmed by a set of programmers who have told ChatGPT how to handle and process and manage and use that data. And all of that becomes what we as users interact with. Now, any biasness that exists in that data set, or a biasness that exists in the programmers who programmed it, will come through in any of the answers that you ask of that system. So when we type in a prompt, say, oh, create me a short story about X, or whatever it might be, any biasness that's in the system will come through in your answer. We can't change the training data set. However, what we can do is we can be much more explicit in what we ask AI systems to do and how we prompt it. So it's kind of, our prompts have that steering wheel effect, so we can try and mitigate any of the bias that might come out of there. So for example, if you ask an AI system to write an opening paragraph about a teacher in Scotland, the chances are it will probably give you an answer that suggests Mrs. Smith is a primary 7 teacher next to it. The chances are it will be a female-based person that comes out, because whether or not it's biased or not, it's likely that most primary school teachers are female, so therefore it will give you a female output. Mitigate that in your prompt. You can be much more specific. Create me a non-gender specific opening paragraph about a teacher in Scotland, for example, or make sure the teacher in the paragraph is male. You can guide the outputs based on your prompting. So becoming quite good at crafting a prompt will make the outputs of your NAI system much more valuable. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can master prompting a bit later on. The other thing to recognise is that sometimes AI can hallucinate, as in it produces outputs that don't really exist. So because you're asking an AI system to create something new, if it doesn't have enough data or information, or it doesn't perhaps understand your prompt well enough, it will just make something up and present it as if it's factual. So we need to be aware that AI outputs can be made up. It's getting better, they are getting better, but if you're doing any big part of research or the like, you do want to make sure that anything that's AI generated, you take the time to double check those facts. And again, the other thing is that to recognise that generative AI is probabilistic in nature. It gives you probable answers, not kind of absolute answers, and that's why that you can put in the same prompt more than once. So create me X, and it'll give you an answer. Then in the same system, you can put the same prompt in, and it will give you a slightly different answer, because there's an element of randomness in how it generates things, and because it's using this will what will probably happen next, and because the data set's constantly updating, the outputs to AI generated responses can change even if you put the same input in. So again, just to acknowledge that generative AI is probabilistic, it's not deterministic. So real world, what does this mean? Well, these are some examples over the past year that I think is worth mentioning, that illustrates some of the issues that I mentioned here. So Gemini, the Google AI system, put this article up and says, we got it wrong, we'll do better. And what would happen is they were so conscious that they were trying to mitigate any biasness in their data sets, it ended up creating outputs that were factually wrong. So for example, there was a request for a US senator from the 1800s to return these pictures that are generated there. And you can see it looks like to be a Native American woman, there are black women, there are people of colour as the first US senator in the 1800s. This is factually incorrect. The first female senator was a white woman in 1922. Now, can you imagine if you're trying to use some of those images to present factual information? This would essentially rewrite or ignore important parts of history around about race and gender. Now, Google have since recognised that that's an issue, and of course they have changed it, and it's much better. But it's just to acknowledge that some of the importance of being critical of any AI output, and that this is generating new content. Is it hallucinating? Is it imagining what's going on there? Can you trust that output, and what's the impact of that output? But again, Google have changed and updated their system. As they said, they got it wrong, they'll do better, and they have. Again, a few years ago, Amazon had a tool to help filter out CVs when people were applying for jobs, and what it was doing, it was literally only picking out male people for interviews, and eventually had to scrap it because they realised its training data, the data it was trained on, was really all based on qualities and attributes that were of current people working in their industry who were all male. Therefore, when they were looking for people to certain jobs, it actually was end up ignoring a lot of female CVs. And again, they've recognised that was an issue and they've scrapped it. But again, just showing the biasness in data and how it's impacting equalities and equalities as outputs. There's an organisation in America, Rite Aid, who were using facial recognition to identify, what might be going on inside their shops and customers. And essentially, what it was doing is it miscategorized customers, black customers, as shoplifters, and therefore they've now been banned for using facial recognition in their shops because they can no longer guarantee the validity of the AI decisions that are made based on facial recognition. So when you look at this and think, well, what does that mean for us and indeed young people? This is a slide that shows survey responses around about how young people have used Gen AI over the past year. And this was done last year. And ages up to 8 to 15, and what do you use Gen AI for? And you can see a list there: finding information or content, creating images, also so on and so forth. But you'll notice that 18% of them say seeking advice. Now that, without knowledge and understanding of the potential drawbacks of generative AI, could be quite dangerous. If you're a young person seeking advice and the outputs aren't quite accurate, that could have serious effects on that young person. The fact that you can create images could be done maliciously just now. So all of these things are the reasons why we need to teach young people about how generative AI works, and indeed how they might mitigate and consider the outputs that are coming back from it, because it's not a real person. It's probabilistic answers to questions based on the data that it has, and if it doesn't have the data, it can make things up. So there's a whole number of different types of risks with generative AI. I've got them listed on this side there. I won't spend too long looking at this. But again, there's on our DigiLearn Scott page, we do have a list of risk areas and kind of what it means for you, and then some mitigations that you can consider. So moving forward, what you might want to be in a position is, well, should I be using AI? Shouldn't it? Is it going to destroy the world? Isn't it? Well, the choice is, you either ignore it and life moves on and you're left behind, or we figure out how to best tackle that. So in order for you to best tackle that, a couple of resources where you might want to start. So as a school, you might want to have a look at the AI Ready School self-evaluation tool on DigiLearn Scott. And what this will do is it'll take you through a set of questions and self-reflection, say how ready is your school for the use of AI, whether it be for admin purposes, for teacher planner purposes, how might students use it, and it's a good place to start. The Gen AI in Education Exploration Hub, which we help fund with Daydream Believers, is a great resource, really good for kind of teaching you how to prompt for different aspects and how you can actually help mitigate some of those biasness, how the prompt themselves can help you generate new content that's meaningful for you. Again, really worth exploring. Common Sense have got a great classification kind of website tool but they've gone through some of the top Gen AI tools, and they've tried to classify it in terms of age and stage. Why might you use this tool? How reliable is it? And they rate it. So if you're interested in having a look at what Common Sense say about Google Gemini, you can go and find its views there, and it's quite a good kind of reference tool for you. The EEF did a report which is worth reading, which was talking about how ChatGPT, in particular generative AI, is affecting teachers. And this particular report and piece of research looked at how does ChatGPT help teachers in lesson preparation. So nothing else but about how they help produce their lessons, whether it be resources, content, ideas. And it's quite compelling. This report will say that teachers effectively using large language models are able to reduce their planning time by about 31%. So again, worth having a look at that if you're interested. We have been speaking to teachers in general about how they've been using AI, and here are some examples that we know it's happening in Scotland. So teachers' use of Gen AI, I use it to create real-life context, problems, and numeracy, which saves a lot of time. So again, resource creation. One of the things I find very useful is getting it to write example pieces of text for when you're doing big writing tasks, which is really quite a good, again, teacher saver time thing. This is a really interesting one. I use it in literacy to support my children with ASD. For example, I had one learner who can only cope with small amounts of text. I'm able to use my iPad, scan the novel, have each chapter summarised into manageable size for him, and have questions created for each chapter. Saves me hours of workload. So in the first instance, as teachers, to help you save time, and it's got the lowest risk of you generating content that you don't have any control or understanding of, is helping you create content. Might be a really good place for you to start, and looking at some of the Daydream Believers Innovation Hub and how you can use prompts to create content might be a really good place to start. It's a huge topic. It's really difficult to cover it in such a short period of time, but I hope this has been interesting. We have lots of resources on DigiLearn Scot, and the links are here. Feel free to have a look. So there's a kind of a bigger summary of what I've just talked about here, about what you need to know, a little bit about the evolution of AI, the AI schools, self-evaluation form, what's happening within Glow in terms of machine learning with AI, and indeed the fact you can access Google Gemini via Glow if your local authority has signed up. So lots of links that will be useful for you. I hope this was interesting. I know it's a short space of time to go over a really complex topic, but thanks for taking time to watch.